Well, Mr. President, I'm making this video to raise my concern. It's time to work and people must now come together and tufanye kazi pamoja. Mr. President, my concern is that when you're giving positions and slots in the government position, Mr. President, unikumbuke na mimi. I will come in to give my best. Nitahakikisha ya kwamba kila familia, every household, Mr. President, that has a child, the parents to contribute every day at least 10 shillings per child. Mr. President, hii itatusaidia ya kwamba kila mtoto akitolewa shilingi 10 kila siku kwa mwezi, that is 300, Mr. President. If a parent can raise 300 to each and every child in every household, Mr. President, in a year the child will have 64,800, Mr. President. This money can be used to develop other sectors of economy, Mr. President, to build parastatals, to build houses, Mr. President. We can have now the capital and the money to fund our housing system, the one that you have as a major goal and target we have to do in this country, Mr. President. Ya pili, nitahakikisha ya kwamba hii pesa imetumika under monitoring and evaluation, Mr. President, so that we have no wastage, Mr. President. As economics, Mr. President, says that every money, everything must be accounted for, Mr. President. Nitahakikisha ya kwamba kila mtoto katika nyumba yoyote ile amepata kupewa shilingi 10, and in every year atakuwa na 64,800, Mr. President. This money will earn interest, Mr. President, because this money is being used to develop other sectors of economy. Then we need to see outcome, we need to see profit, and we need to see the income, Mr. President. This money can be given 30% profit, Mr. President. That is close to 19,000, 16,000, Mr. President. Ninayosema ni kwamba the profit will go back to the parents, so that mzazi akitoa naye pia atapewa profit ile ya juu, that is 30% of the amount mtoto amepata as profit. Another issue, Mr. President, I'm concerned with is the pricing system and taxation, Mr. President. Kwa muda mrefu tumepata uzito wa kutoa ushuru kwenye serikali, na hii inadunisha maendeleo katika nchi yetu. Mr. President, as I can say it clearly, giving tax is giving to help other people. I really love to tell my countrymen that when you give tax, however much it is, however much the percentage is, this money is being used to develop other sectors of economy. Mr. President, what I can insist on is the countryman has to understand that there has to be a trust and obeying the authorities. When it comes to giving out tax, you have to just believe and give it willingly. When you trust and obey in the authorities, it means that you also obey the laws of corruption. As we all know, it's not good to be corrupt. It's been us all along who have been corrupt in this country, Mr. President. The citizen, we as the citizen, we've been corrupt. And this has rendered development in most sectors of this economy and the government as a whole. Hakuna haja ya mtu kuhonga, especially polisi wa barabara, as I can see the traffic police. wakati mingi tunapata kwamba dereva ako na makosa fulani, ama hana leseni, ama hajahitimu kiwango cha kuendesha gari, for example trailer, lorry and small cars, Mr. President. In most situations, the drivers or the conductors tend to bribe the policemen. This is not being patient and obedient and following rules, Mr. President. As a government official, Mr. President, I will encourage that this act is dealt with, and everyone has to respect the authorities by not giving them bribes, because in the long run, the money that you give is not being taxed. It goes to the hand of another person. And in most cases, I can see in our roads and the matatus in Nairobi especially, there are occasions where when it rains, the price is being hiked. In the long run, this act has rendered development, because when you take so much from the people, you reduce their budget that they had, you reduce their amount of money that they've planned for before they get to board any car or take an Uber or any matatu, Mr. President. And in the long run, this affects the purchasing power and the consumer's behavior in the society, which otherwise has been seen to stagnate growth as citizen, Mr. President. Ninachosema ni kwamba mengi yamefanyika katika sekta ya transport, Mr. President, and many people are not sure whether they are doing it willingly, or is this the police officers who are asking the money willingly. Now this is another issue that we have to consider and look upon, so that we can help this country, Mr. President. And another issue is taxation, Mr. President. I have for the last 5 years tried to figure out and study why most people tend to increase the prices of commodities and goods in the market, yet we can maintain the prices of commodities vis-a-vis taxation being increased. I want to put this forward to explain to my countrymen that when the government imposes a tax in any commodity or any sector of the economy, it means that we have to have plan B, or we have to look for any other option that we can venture into or invest in or put much effort in by putting in capital to develop that sector of the economy. For example, let's take maize for example. When tax has been imposed on maize, you find that most companies in this country, Mr. President, especially the millers, the middlemen, transport sector, you find the suppliers tend to increase the price because there are so many factors like fuel, their tax being increased. But this doesn't necessarily mean that as a supplier, as a producer, you have to increase the price of the commodity. Let's take a linear graph, Mr. President, where the price is constant and taxation increases, Mr. President. Does this in the long run help us maintain the value of our currency? I believe that this price being constant vis-a-vis taxation being increased on a commodity gives us the brain and energy to look for any other sectors of the economy to invest and venture into, Mr. President. What I mean is, mara mingi tumepata tax inaongezwa katika fuel, katika maize, katika viwanda vyetu vinginevyo. Unapata wenye viwanda wanaongeza price ya kulipia bidhaa. Namna hii tunapata ya kwamba the consumer, we as the citizen, we are the consumer in most cases, we tend to stagnate in buying. This is now the consumer behavior, Mr. President. The consumers start to stagnate in buying, and marginal propensity to consume reduces, because the price is high vis-a-vis the tax has increased, Mr. President. If we maintain the price in this country, Mr. President, in most sectors and major commodities, mostly the basic needs, Mr. President, we will at least lower stigmatization amongst the citizen, and people will have positive purchasing power that will otherwise increase the amount of tax being taken by the government that can be used in other sectors of economy, Mr. President. Another issue is on budgeting, Mr. President. Mara mingi tunapata ya kwamba government has budgeted for a whole year, Mr. President, and we are doing budgeting, then it means we have catered for the payment of every civil worker, every parastatal, any governmental office is paid for, Mr. President. Then fully we have to say that we don't need necessary to see people protesting against payment delays, Mr. President. This is another issue that lowers moral and the morale to do work in our country. Mostly we see our teachers striking. This is something that has to be taken serious, and another issue is the doctors striking, Mr. President. On the other hand, I've tried to contradict and criticize certain acts by our doctors, mostly when I see in the records, Mr. President. We've seen during 2019 Corona, Mr. President, 2020, we've seen misembezzlement of medical appliances and mismanagement of funds in some cases. Most of the commodities and appliances given to the docket of doctors, Mr. President, medicine, you find that most people or doctors tend to buy them and not give them to the mostly the dispensaries around, and when you go to the hospital you don't get treatment, yet these are things that have been budgeted for in this country, Mr. President. These are small issues that we need to counter-check so that every single unit in every hospital is well equipped, have everything. The other time the cabinet, the CS said that health said that the country is well equipped and cancer is treatable in our country. Then we have to counter-check constantly if we do have these things, update them, and everything is in order, so that we don't take so much money to get medicine in any other country, Mr. President. This money can be used here in our country, and people get paid, and the economy goes on smoothly, Mr. President. Another issue, Mr. President, is based in the rural homes, Mr. President. In most cases, our rural homes are underdeveloped, Mr. President. Sincerely speaking, we have minimal roads. We have no network that are worth it. Mostly they are tarmac roads that started and not completed, yet they were budgeted for. And in most cases, we find most of the homes don't have electricity. This is another issue that delays development, Mr. President, any other in rural areas. If we venture into developing our rural areas, Mr. President, such as bringing road networks and up to making electricity to go to our rural areas, we'll start having millers doing their work close to their places. We'll reduce cases like people leaving their homes to come to get congested in Nairobi, especially major cities. Now we'll reduce the cost of living in Nairobi and take it to another area to develop. Let's take, for example, in mostly Nyanza areas, and we have few electric lines in our homes, Mr. President. This is another issue that has to be checked in every home and every place in rural area in this country, Mr. President, so that people don't congest in major cities. We reduce the cost of living, we reduce the congestion in our housing systems, so that we can fully plan for the number of people who are in Nairobi. Another issue is that most people have raised is that we have to counter-check as a government official, is that in most places in Nairobi currently we are having migration from different people, different walk of every country. Mr. President, this is not a bad idea. We can then get people who are doing businesses have conducive environment that they fully feel they are good to work in, and to criticize the act of Kanjo vis-a-vis the interests of the people, to remove them from their workplaces. This is an issue that can be counter-checked, and we come to an agreement, and every business person to have a KRA pin, so that however small you give to the government, it's accounted for in this country. However, whatever business you are doing, from the nano business to micro business to macro business, Mr. President, has to be accounted for. Each and every person doing business employed in this country must have a KRA pin that is taxable, Mr. President. It's time to reduce the number of filing nil returns, Mr. President. Another issue, Mr. President, I have to raise is the development of major markets in this country, like Mudhurwa market. We have Marikiti market, and Mr. President, this is a serious case. Walking to Mudhurwa is not easy, and going to Marikiti also is not easy. It's time to expand the market, make it fully composed, so that everyone comfortably gets in it. I've walked to Bama, where meat is being sold in Nairobi. It's one of the major places where we get our meat products, Mr. President, and the condition there and vis-a-vis the population is not conducive. However much we take tax from them, it means that we need to upgrade so that we get more people on board. How I've come to solve this issue is that we can make our markets, especially Mudhurwa, to modernize the markets, Mr. President. It's time to modernize our markets, not to have a simple structure, an open air. We need to have shops, we need to have things like malls where we have hotels inside, we have groceries inside, we have every kind of business happening inside. And in doing this, our country and citizens have to understand that upgrading our markets and major places should be forefront, because when a mall is built in, especially let's say Mudhurwa, we'll have every type of business taking place. We now have people dealing with electronics, we'll have people dealing with fruits, vegetable, we have people bringing in more advanced things that can be taxed, and we can account for the numbers that we get into our market, so that we can control inflation in our markets, Mr. President. When we have accountability of every commodity getting into our market, not necessarily taxing the goods coming from the import and export authorities, Mr. President, we can also increase our business and commodities being accounted for that gets in, so that we control the inflation and fluctuation of prices. In most cases, you find in Mudhurwa that today you can buy a bucket of potato at 300, and the following week you'll buy it at 800, Mr. President. This is a big margin that causes inflation and fluctuation of prices in this country, because we don't monitor our commodities that get into the markets. We cannot account how much did Mudurwa get in, and how much do we get in loss, and how much do we get in. When we take accountability of all these issues, and our commodities will be, let's say for example, I've gone to Capital Center Naivas. This is a mall, kind of a mall, and in every sector there we have hotels, we have art cafe, and people are employed. Everyone employed there have KRA pins. Then the government can tax them, and we can bring more people on board who are giving out tax, Mr. President. We need more people who are doing business, people who are willing to bring up ideas and employ other people. This is the only way we can give employment in this country, because necessarily the government cannot accommodate everyone in every slot. We have few slots, and developing other sectors of economy in other areas, we can extend our CBD or the central business. We can extend it big and big and big. We get to Dandora, we go to big sea places, and we segment every place so that we have modern places to do business and conducive places to do business, so that everyone in this country enjoy the freedom of paying tax, enjoy the willingness of giving tax that they see even in the social facilities that the government provide. The sport sectors, Mr. President, has to be improved, so that we have even many talented Kenyans who can play basketball, tennis, Mr. President. We have YouTube nowadays. People can even do some sort of content and earn. You can do sports, you can do food challenge, you can do. We have to educate our young Kenyans the benefit of using even the internet to earn money, to have affiliate businesses, Mr. President, rather than having our youths posting ideas, none other than that can give create things in this country. We can have more and more advanced technology in our country, Mr. President, so that we do better even in our agriculture sector, Mr. President. Another issue I want to raise is that there are problems faced in slums. Nairobi have got slums, major cities in Kenya have slums, Mr. President. I want to say, raise an issue here, and this measure is that in most slums in our country, we find that there are people, or rather landlord or households, that have free electricity, Mr. President. I want to explain this in simple terms, that when we have free things in our country, things which are otherwise taxable, and we don't pay tax to them for them, Mr. President, it means that we are putting burden to the taxpayers. Let's say, for example, there are a group of people who are working class, and the Kenya Power has to take bills because they give us the energy, and we have to pay in form of tax. Now the government has to get in to pay all the bills that are not accounted for by Kenya Power, because the government is now paying the Kenyan company, you see. Now, in this scenario where many households forge to get electricity into their houses, others they don't pay for them, Mr. President. In most cases, you find that there are landlords who give out electricity to various houses, and we have free electricity now. You can only pay rent, and this means that we are simply being corrupt. And you have to understand the word that I say, corrupt, because we are using this for free. We are dodging to pay the bills for electricity, when we get everything in order and improve our lifestyle, Mr. President, so that every household has the capability to pay, the willingness and ability to pay the bills like water bills and electric bills, Mr. President, by maintaining other sectors of economy such as price in this country, Mr. President, so that someone is willing and able to buy comfortably vis-a-vis the tax increasing. Let me explain the fact that tax has to increase in this country to my countrymen. It means that, one, the government has to control inflation in a country and has to control deflation in a country. Inflation is when money is too much in the economy. Why do we get money too much in the economy? It means that there are so many people who are holding money. There are so many people who are holding properties otherwise they are not using, like land. You find someone has a land that has been there for like 5 years, 10 years. They are not paying tax to those properties. They are not doing any investment, and there are many people who want that place to use it and develop and give employment to other people, so that we can solve the issue of unemployment in this country. When you start a business as a person, it means that you are willing and able to employ someone. When you do that, you help the government to solve the issue of unemployment in this country. To do that, Mr. President and our countrymen, it means that we, as a nation, we need to pay bills, we need to give tax. So when you hold money, for example, you have 200 million in your bank account for 5 years, for 1 year you have it, you are not investing with that money, you are not doing anything with that money, it means that you are wasting a property of this country. You are wasting money that could otherwise be used by the government to develop other sectors of the economy. Remember, the banks only give a percentage of what they have to the government every month, or rather annually. So your money would only be taken like maybe 200 out of 200 million, maybe 2,000 a year. You see, you still have 190 something million to invest with. So it means that we need to circulate money. However much you take money somewhere to anywhere, don't keep it stay for long, or rather you give it to official like insurance company we use that money to invest with. But when you keep money for yourself, rather, or international banks, you are limiting this country to develop. So we need to follow the right channel. We need to use our things rightfully in this country, so that every sector of economy is running smoothly and everyone is well equipped. I believe that we can develop our slums. I believe that we can upgrade our iron houses to permanent houses. I believe we can make buildings, even hotels in our major cities that could otherwise attract tourists in this country. Mr. President, with those few remarks, I'm glad to talk to my countrymen, and I hope we are going to be the best, and we follow the notion that yes, we can, because this is a challenge. We have been challenged by our authorities, and we need to give the best that we have, so that the government also give us the best. When you do the best, it means that you don't forge your way to government offices, you don't forge your way to get certificates, you don't forge your ways to get certain assistance that will otherwise stagnate progress in our country. Thank you guys, and be blessed.